Thank you. My name is Joanne Malenko, and I'm from the Movement Disorder Clinic, which is just across the field from here. And I'm here today to talk about Parkinson's disease. The presentation is about 45 minutes long, and then if you have any questions after, I can answer your questions. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is Parkinson's disease? Well, it's a progressive, irreversible neurological disease, and it's caused by the death of substantia nigra cells. And these cells are found deep in the brain, and they produce a neurotransmitter, or like a chemical called dopamine. And one of the important things that dopamine does is it sends signals to the rest of our brain to help us move smoothly. And this is just a picture of a brain. And this is where that substantia nigra area is that produces the dopamine. MAOB is another chemical released in the synapse of the nerve that also destroys dopamine, and I'll talk about that later when I talk about medications used to treat Parkinson's. And as you find out as we go along, symptoms do vary. When about 50% of these cells have died, that's when you start noticing symptoms of Parkinson's. Some of the more recent literature says up to 80% of cells have died before you notice symptoms of Parkinson's. So the brain really protects itself for a while until there's been enough cell loss that you start noticing symptoms. This is a picture of a PET scan. So on my right side is a highlighted area of the substantia nigra area. So on the left side is the Parkinson's slide, and you'll notice that there's obviously some cell death because that area isn't highlighted. Normally, acetylcholine, which is another neurotransmitter, and dopamine are level, but with Parkinson's, there's an imbalance. So you know, like when we're on the teeter-totter and the heavier person's at the bottom and the lighter person's at the top? Well, that's the comparison with this with the dopamine. There's less dopamine, so there's an imbalance. And you'll see this slide later on when I talk about medications used to treat Parkinson's. Some medications boost dopamine, and other medications block the acetylcholine to try and get that balance. So Parkinson's has been around for a long time. Even during the time of Christ, doctors and others talked about people with a stooped posture and a tremor. But it wasn't until Dr. James Parkinson, so that's where they got the name from, back in 1817 when he wrote an essay on the shaking palsy. And this is just an excerpt from that essay. However, the last part of the statement, where it says the senses and intellect are uninjured, we know that's not to be true today in 2010. We know that sometimes Parkinson's can affect our memory and our emotions, and I'll talk about that later. There's many theories as to what causes Parkinson's, and we don't really know a definite cause. But some of the theories, and there's research being done all over the world to try and find that cause, but some of the theories are well, is it genetic? And they did discover about 5 years ago that there is a gene called Parkin. So about 10% of people with Parkinson's, it does have a genetic component, meaning it does run in the family. But that's a pretty small percentage, and it's fairly new news. We've only known that for the last 5 years. Aging, if we all live long enough, you know, as we age, we lose different cells from all over our body. So if we all lived long enough, we would all develop Parkinson's. Or is there something in the environment? Is it pesticides? Is it something that we've inhaled over the years that has caused this cell death? Or is it a combination of genetics and environment? I'll mention Michael J. Fox a few times today because he's been so public about his Parkinson's. Well, the first TV show he was involved with had about 35 cast and staff, and of those 35, 5 have developed Parkinson's. So was there something in that environment? There is one known toxin to cause Parkinson's, and it's called MPTP. And back in the 80s, when there was lots of drugs being experimented with in the States, some scientists developed their own homegrown heroin that was contaminated with MPTP. And any addict injecting themselves with this contaminated heroin developed Parkinson's. So don't worry, MPTP isn't something we find in bottled water or food preservatives. It's a heroin derivative. But in the labs, when they want to induce Parkinson's on some of the animals, like on the mice or the rats, they will inject them with this MPTP, and that would give them the Parkinson's. So right now, 2010, that's the only known toxin we know that causes Parkinson's. But as I said, there's research being done all over the world to try and find a cause.